Hello, let's talk about news assignments and going out and shooting news. This is the first photo assignment that I'm giving all of you, but it's the one that is due almost the latest. Although this is week 2 and I'm signing you to go out and take news photos, I don't expect you to turn in 4 photos of a news event with full cut lines until week 9, which is like the first week in March. So the reason behind that is you don't know when news is going to happen, when a breaking event is going to show up in your day. So for the next 8 weeks or so, I want you to carry around your camera and look for things that are breaking news. Sometimes that can be bad weather, sometimes that could be a fire, sometimes it could be an accident. We're going to talk about that today and how you should go about taking news photos, and also how to deal with the stress that comes with having to deal with something that is traumatic sometimes. So let's talk about that. First, what is news? Back in the first day of journalism, I had my first Journalism 101 class, and the teacher asked me, what is news? And of course, I was a smart aleck and said, well, it's the plural of new. Well, yeah, that is true. And then he, pressed a little further, and I said, well, it's whatever your editor tells you it is. Also a pragmatic answer, but also I was being a smart aleck again. This is what news is. By the way, sometimes you see on the internet that news means notices, entertainment, weather, and sports. That's malarkey. It is literally the plural of the word new. So, but a news story does have certain characteristics. First, impact. It affects people's lives, like the weather, like a fire, like an accident. Timeliness. A news story is something that if you don't tell that story within the first 24 hours, couple of days, it's no longer important. It loses its impact. So, a story like, problems with our environment. It's news, but it's more of a feature news because, you can tell the same story next week, 2 weeks from now. The story, as far as when you tell it, is not important. But, a fire today is nothing tomorrow. So, timeliness is important, and getting that news out quickly is important. Prominence, some people are just important. They are news. The President of the United States, because of his position, whatever he or she does, we report it because of their position. Celebrities come under this also. Important figures. I don't want to say celebrities again, but government officials, leaders in your community, when they do something, it's important and it becomes news. Proximity is important. What is a news story in southern Indiana might have zero meaning to anyone living in northern Indiana. So, think about that when you are covering a story. It's like, well, something happened in Paducah today. Wonderful. And not really relevant to our area, and wouldn't be a news story. Conflict is probably the go-to news characteristic. Human versus nature, human versus technology, human versus human. Whenever there's conflict, there's usually a story in there. And when you do cover a story that has some conflict in it, don't take sides. Shoot both sides of the story, or all 3 sides of the story. Whatever it takes. You are to be neutral, a neutral observer in that case. Novelty, sometimes something happens that's unique, and in that uniqueness makes it a news story. If someone built their own homemade rocket and they actually managed to make it out into space, yeah, that's new. That's different. It's never been done before. So you may cover that because of just how novel it is. And this is kind of in with prominent sometimes too, but if someone sets like some kind of record, like the person who ate the most hot dogs, yeah, probably because it is unique, different, novel, you would cover that as a news story. And maybe that person is prominent. Maybe doing that has pushed them into the vortex of attention. But things that are new and different, unique, we want to hear about it and hopefully be entertained by it. And then there's just current interests. There's certain things going on in your community that, especially with holidays, that become news. So think about what's going on in your community, certain events, certain holidays, certain regular happenings. And, if it has impact, novelty, proximity, yeah, it'll make for a good photo story. Common news assignments, some of them I mentioned already, like fires and accidents, but crime, always a go-to type of breaking news story. A crime usually is a singular event, hopefully is a singular event. So if you have a scanner, mentioned in the last lecture about how to cover assignments, you may be able to take a picture of the crime, the aftermath of a crime, I hate to say it, the victims of a crime. It's our job to be the eyes and sometimes the ears of the public when a crime happens, when a fire happens, when an accident happens. And also weather. I mentioned that earlier in this lecture too, that human versus Mother Nature. Yeah, it makes for a story sometimes, especially if it's something on the extremes, a large snowfall, a record high temperature, something along those lines. It's raining today. Yeah, it's still news, and that's why they cover it, on your local news station. But at the same time, if it comes to the photojournalist, it's usually something on the extremes. Now, since you are taking photographs of traumatic situations like a crime, like a fire, like an accident, it comes with a certain amount of stress, and we need to deal with it. Something that wasn't talked about in the past with covering news stories. You just figure, well, they're journalists, they'll toughen up and be able to handle it. Well, we need to talk about it because it hurts your well-being, and that is never a good thing. So when you're out there covering news, know your limits. If you get to the point where you say, I can't do this anymore, or I can't cover this, walk away. Especially with just a course at a university for taking photographs, certainly walk away when the stress becomes too much. In the professional world, same thing. It may hurt your job, but what's more important, you or your job? It's always going to be you. Take breaks, talk to other people about it. Good way to relieve that stress. Another way of releasing stress is, exercise, get moving, get those muscles going, get some sweat going. And it does, by, its nature, relieve stress. Same thing with having a hobby, something that takes your mind away from the stressful situation and puts it in a more peaceful situation. Anything from, not photography, obviously, cooking, maybe reading a book, watching a movie, any of those things, just to kind of turn the mind off for a while and not have to deal with the stress of the situations you find yourself in. And if things get really bad, seek professional help. There's no shame in it. What to do when you get to a news scene? One, identify yourself. You're not an undercover agent. Hi, I'm Ron Allman. I'm with this news organization. I'm going to be taking some photos. And, usually first responders, people there, they understand. You have a job, they have a job. As long as you don't interfere with each other, you're usually in good shape. Be calm, be focused. You have a job to do. Get the photos that you need. Don't get into a stressed mindset. Don't become part of the story. And there is a line in the sand too, where you're a journalist or you're a human being. If you can help someone, help them. Be that human being. Then get the photo. And sometimes there's a choice. Either you get that wonderful photo or you help that person. And one event that I think about is that Pulitzer Prize winning photo of the girl who just got hit with napalm, had her clothes burn off, her skin is burning, running toward the photographer, and you're thinking, why doesn't the photographer do something to help her? He took the photo, then he helped her, and continued to help her throughout her whole life. So if he, helped the girl, then took the photo, and it might have been the same result. But he took a couple of photos and then went and helped. So he was able to cover not only being a photojournalist, but also being a human being. You have to be sensitive to the victims of, say, crime or a fire or an accident. They're in a very fragile state at that time. So keep that in mind when you are talking to them, taking their photos. By the same token, do know your rights. If you are in a public place, taking a picture of something that's happening in a public place, you're probably allowed to be there. Now, if the police have sectioned off an area, they don't want regular people in there, then don't go. But if you show up to, say, an accident, and there's a police officer there saying you can't take photos of it, he's lying. Or someone grabs your camera and say you can't take pictures of this, he's lying. If you're in a public place, they're in a public place. Just because they have a uniform on doesn't mean they can make the rules up as they go along. There are certain rules that we call laws, and just because they're enforcers of the law doesn't mean that they're educated with the law. We'll talk more about that later in the semester when we talk about the law and ethics and what rights you have. So what to know now: public place, shooting a public event, you're fine. And don't let anyone take your camera. Then that should cover you for now. Protect yourself. You don't have to get so close to the fire that your camera melts, or so close to the accident that you can possibly step on debris and hurt yourself. Use common sense when you're out there. And you still have to come first in your life, because without you, what are you going to do, right? Yeah, I know that sounds like a bad joke, but it has that truism in there. And you do have to respect authority. If a police officer says, back up, back up. Yes, you're allowed to be there, but don't be a jerk about it. If they're bringing a stretcher through that area, just because it would be a good place for the photo doesn't mean that the photo is more important than this person's life. So, respect the authority, but don't let them walk all over you. In general, in life, respect authority and don't let them walk all over you. So, the assignment for news would be to go out and shoot an event that would have those news characteristics we talked about earlier. And I will go back to them right there. And take the 4 best photos you have, upload that onto Canvas, and for each photo have a complete cut line. Who, what, where, when, possibly why, possibly how. Those two, sometimes you don't know right away. When you are identifying someone in the photo, make sure you get a full identification, first name, last name, maybe an age or city they're from, and make sure that the cut line tells me what's going on in the photo. Even though the photo should tell a story by itself, the cut line adds that additional information to round out that story. So that's your news assignment. It may be due many weeks from now, but don't forget about it. Carry your camera around, and I wish you luck.